Okay, this is I think week 10. Um, this is their player. I've changed some stuff. So first you'll see, and I'm red, but that's an easy fix. But there's a couple things I changed. If we go to our scene, we now have object hierarchies, and we can explain that quickly. So inside of inside of our transform, what we now do is now we have the set parent, get local matrix, and get world matrix. So now what we do is we look at this parent variable to see if there's a parent transform. And if there's a parent transform, then we adjust. We know that there's a parent, which means that we are in a local transform. So now we are local. Our transform is now a relative based off of where our parent transform is. So we have to adjust it. And that's where we do the get local matrix, get world matrix, as well as inside of game objects. Um, Same with the draw. So now when we do this when we do this get world matrix, it's a recursive, so we get the world matrix of the parent of the parent of the parent. So we can infinitely get parents now. And what we do is we just inside of our draw, we get the world matrix, and then we update our transform and multiply it by our world matrix. And then we just draw it. So then that kind of shows how we can draw relative based on parents. And I also included it just so so we could show you a version, and then we'll also code some of that stuff today to kind of show how you can work with the scale and that stuff. But um, the main thing I did was that when I instantiate a player game object, now I can just have the health player game object be a parent of the player game object. So now my health bar game object doesn't health bar control. We can look at the health bar controller, and we see that now we don't have to update position. We just now have to update max HP, current HP, and health percentage. And so now we can now go in here. I have a parent player game object, and then there's a child health. So if no matter where I move, it'll be wherever I set it. And in this case, I set it. I want it -20. But if I scale a parent, I also scale a child, the children. So I have to divide it by the scale of the y of my parent. Same thing with position as well. So this is position. I want it -20 upwards, or I want -20 or 20 degrees above my player. So I have to divide it by the scale of the y. And then same with the scale where I wanted a 20/7. So I divide it by the scale of the x and y in order to get that right dimension. Um, and then I did that for the enemies as well. So um, every enemy now has a child named enemy health bar game object, and then that allows us just to follow the enemy. There's a lot of cool things that you can do, and that I will show in a separate video this week. Because it'll be in Unity, so I can show you kind of a lot of the works on kind of that stuff. So obviously that was the main thing we did this week, but there's kind of three things I want to do to create a game. I want to make a character stats component, which it was just a lot of variable stuff. So I had it here, and I'll explain it, kind of everything what we'll do. I want to start scene where you choose your stats. You can either choose the tank, the sniper, or the mid range. And we can explain that right now. Then character stats controller. All it is just a list of a lot of variables talking about what player you are. So if you're a tank, you have high HP and low range. But if you're a sniper, you have low HP, high range, and high speed, stuff like that. And all I do is I have a start where it says, hey, depending on we will set the player archetype, and if the player archetype is 0, we set all these variables to the max health. If the player archetype is 1, then we do for the sniper class. If we do 2, then we do the mid-range like assault class. Um, I don't have it attached to anything yet, but it shall be called. And finally, when someone takes damage, um, I want that someone to actually have a text that appears saying, "Hey, this is the amount of damage you've taken," and then call it or destroy it after a certain period of time. So, since we already have the character stats, let's kind of do the scene. So I have a scene already made where it is just a selection scene. And all right now you have is a camera game object instantiated. And remember to always have a camera game object. But what we can do now is there's going to be a lot of copying and pasting for this stuff. But what I want to first do is I want to create a scene controller. Start scene controller game object equals new game object. This is a way to create a game object that you only want to use once. It is just a scene controller. We don't really need to use it much. Start scene name object. What we want to do is we want to do start scene controller game object add component, and we want to do the start scene controller.js. So it would be new start scene controller. My idea is that you will have X number of characters, in this case it's 3, all with their all displayed, and what we want to do is we want to have some sort of distinction between which one's which. So that's what the start scene controller will do. So what we will do is then we will add another component, and we'll do a new polygon. And what we'll do is just have a fill style of black. And then I have the points of assets dot triangle. I can show that as well. Assets dot triangle is just an upside down triangle. We want to adjust the scale now. So start seeing dot transform dot scale equals new vector 2 and then 10. And then we would need to instantiate. State start scene start scene controller game object new vector 2 0 0. So now hopefully let's do the selection scene so that we can kind of, and now we have a triangle in the middle at 0 0. Now here where the fun part begins. What we want to do, or let's pull this up, is we want game object 1 here, game object 2 here, and game object 3 over here, explaining each character basically what you can do. And we need to find a way to actually move between the two. So let's do that. So obviously what we could do is we could do a game object for text, game object for like the model. And this will work, but say we want to do more stuff for creating or describing, hey, maybe the stats are low for this. So maybe when we wanted to explain the stats, it's like, hey, the stats for this is 5, but then the stats, like your health is 20, but your damage is 10, and your speed is 20, or something like that inside of there as well. We could do that. but this just kind of makes everything weirdly aligned and stuff. So the next best thing to do is we want to create a parent game object that kind of has everything. Um, and the usefulness of this is that say I had like 10 game objects explaining the character. Well, what would happen is if I add a new character, I need to move everything. Well, rather than moving everything manually over, which can be a hassle. I mean, it's not the end of the world if that happens. But what I could do is just move the parent container over, and then it'll move everything else over. So what we shall do is we shall create a tank UI container game object. And what we'll do is we will just do instantiate a new game object called tank UI container game object. And now we position this at a new vector2 -400, 0. And now there's nothing on under it yet. It is just the empty UI game object. UI in parentheses because we won't be doing any moving and that stuff. So UI is really important. But now what we can do now is we can do we can establish the tank model game object, and we can do a new game object, tank game object, and we want to add a tag to this so that we can say, hey, let's get this player option when we need to. So now we go to the tank model and we need to add some components. We first need to add a polygon, and let's do the fill style be purple. And then we need to do points, and just for right now, let's just do assets.square. And now what we will do now is then we will add. So there's a couple ways you can go about this. One thing you could do is have a player stats manager game object, and when you click enter, you read which one you do, or you read which character you're hovering over, and then that sends the stats over. But I found it easier just to have the stats component on every single instance of the player options. And then what we can do now is inside of the stats, we just set the player archetype, and that will set everything else. And we'll set this to 0 since it's the tank. And now we need to adjust the scale. So now we do scale transform scale equals new vector2. And let's scale it 50-50 so you can see it. And then so now what we can do now is if we instantiate, say I want my tank game object -400, 0, we could do this, and we can do it like this. So now we see, now it's over there. But I don't want my tank game object I want my tank game object to be under the tank UI container so that everything related to my tank can be under there. So what I will do then is I'll do my tank model game object and get the transform and do set parent. And then I will get the tank UI container dot transform, and we will input that as the transform because that's what it needs. And now it's not there. Oh, you can see it over there. It's almost double because what's happening is that my container UI is right here, for example. And what it's saying is, hey, we need to move another negative 400 for this child inside of the parent game object. So you move your parent game object, and then you move on top of that your child game object. So what we need to do is we just need to put it at 0, and it'll be at 0, 0. And then that will go to our parent game object, and it'll be like, oh, it's at negative 400, 0. And now it's at negative 400, 0. And boom. That is part one of a two-part step for this. And now what we want to do is we want to do a tank text game object. Now it's as simple as a new game object, tank text game object. We don't need a tag because we don't really need to reference it. And all we do is we do the tank text dot add component, new text. Let's do fill style of black, and text should just be a tank. One thing to note is that our tank UI container game object has a scale of 1. So that means that we don't really have to worry about the scale for any of the stuff, but just to ensure that everything's good, we just set the scale of 1 to 1, and then we can instantiate it at the tank text game object, new vector 2, and we want it above. So let's do 0, negative 75. And now what we do is we just copy and paste this, but we'll use the tank text game object instead. And that's kind of not what we want. We kind of want it to be centered. But so what's happening is that the leftmost edge is centered on 0, 0. So the best way I found is just kind of adjust it. After adjusting it a little bit, I found that negative 25 is okay. And now that's pretty good, pretty well centered. So now that we have a empty game object where we have two subgame or children game objects underneath of a blue square or a purple rectangle and then a text, let's do this again, but for the other two classes that we have stats for. So this is the tank. The next one shall be the sniper. And then you can copy and paste this and go through line by line and adjust stuff. So rather than having tank, it will be sniper. And we can just copy and paste this down. So it is a sniper. Sniper, and then we copy and paste to do all this. And then sniper. Always be careful with copying and pasting stuff. Just because it would be kind of hard to debug. We have the sniper there, we need the sniper there. And let's do blue for the character, and let's have this sniper. So now all we have to do now is adjust the parent game object to be at 0, and it should just work now. We see that the sniper is offset a little. That's because sniper is longer, so it kind of pushed it over. I found that negative 37.5 to be good. And now we have the sniper text. And now we just do the exact same thing again for the assault. And we just do the exact same thing. ASS. I think that's how you spell assault. Yeah, that's how we do it here. We need to do the UIs of that. we need to change this to that. There, there. But now the best thing is now that we can now move every single child game object underneath the parent, and it all kind of just works now because that's the power of kind of game object hierarchies. So, and we need to change the text to assault. I'll say it's just UNT, and it's just UNT. And we think we have 45. And if we don't want that at 0, we want that at 400. So now, and let's change it to yellow. So now we have our 3. Now we have a very basic UI saying, hey, shows the 3 types of characters, and then boom. Next thing, what we can do now is now we need to expand our start scene controller. This is where it gets a little bit interesting. What we are going to do is we will first instantiate player options. We'll do this dot player options, and we'll do this by using the tag. And I'll show what the tag is. Inside of game objects, what I have is I have another variable called tag, and it's called no tag if it's not instantiated. But what it does is it's just like find. It's just like find, but we do, instead of find, we do filter. So we get every single game object that has this label on it. And in this case, it is the 3 child game objects, which is very important to note because but what we'll do now is we'll establish the current selected player by the player option that is this dot currently selected index. So now we get the first index and we say, hey, that's our player. Okay, so now let's do this, and let's just set it on top of the player. Let's just say, hey, this dot transform dot position equals this dot currently selected in player dot transform dot position, and we'll see a couple errors. Obviously, what we will do is we will instantiate this at the very end to show the thing above it. It's at 0, 0. And the reason why is because we're now referencing the local transform of the game object. So we set it locally at 0, 0, but we need to get the world. So we got to do some. There's the correct way, and then there's the way I do it. I'm just letting you know right now. I did some Googling, and the way we want to do this is we want to say, hey, something very similar to, I think it's the game object draw. I based off of this, where we said, hey, let's get the world matrix and let's see where the where it goes, pretty much. But the way I did it was I just said, hey, let world matrix equal this dot currently selected player dot transform dot get world matrix. And then I set the transform dot position equal to a new vector 2 because the position needs to be a new vector 2. And after Googling a bit, so with the world matrix, our position in the X is referenced at the variable M41, which is just I think it's column 4 row 1, or yeah, column 4 row 1, and we want the same thing but column 4 row 2. And now we get the world matrix of it. So now if we look at it, and I should put this back down. And now it's actually above our index 1 now because it's based on the world matrix of it. And now since we have that, we just need to find a y, and let's look at 150, and that looks good. So now we have it kind of showing that, hey, we were going to select this. So now what we want to do is we just need to do input dot keys down this frame. And if we includes arrow left, and we also need to include arrow right, and we also need to see if it is enter. Or let's do space. That's kind of more. But what we need to do now is we need to distinct between, if we go left, what we need to do is we need to subtract 1, but there's 2 ways to do it, because if we're at 0, we subtract 1 that's -1, so we just got to loop it around. There's probably an easier way, but using remainders, but what I like to do is just get player options length -1. Otherwise, we just do this dot currently selected index minus equals 1. Same thing with this, where instead of doing 1, we just do this dot player options -1. Otherwise, we set it equal to 0, and then we plus equals 1. And then after all of this, we just need to do one change where we say, hey, we need to update the currently selected player to be this dot player options of this dot currently selected index. So now if we go over, if we click left arrow, oh, it is saying that reading transform wrong. Did I? Did I do arrow right now? This dot currently equals this dot player options. Yes, is I need downline. Okay. If I go over and go back, it'll now let me loop. If I go left, yep, I need downline. So now if I go left, I can go left, I can go right. Now, enter. So some of you may, one option that maybe you could be thinking is, hey, I don't want to worry about this world matrix. I just want to find, why not just do the container? The main reason why the container is bad is we need to reference the player stats, and you could put the player character stats on the container, which now thinking about that would also work. That would just be as simple as adding the character controller to this for all of them, but and then adjust the player options to be the container. But I wanted to do it like this because that was the first way it came to my mind. But we need to also worry about globals. So now we come into an issue where scene one has information that scene two needs in order to run. So the way we do this is with a globals variable, just globals, a globals class really. And all it is an empty class inside of our engine. Um, and yep. So the way we do a variable, for example, is we do globals dot player archetype color, and we just do, and this will now, if in scene in my like main scene now, I can reference globals dot player archetype color to get the color of my the player I selected, and we just get the polygon and we get the dot fill style. And then what I also want to do, so one thing you could do is get the stats of every single stat that we did and set it into a global. But I found that it is just easier to do the whole character stat controller sheet. And then what we want to do now is we want to scene manager dot load scene new main scene. So now when this happens, hopefully, if I click on spacebar, I get to the new scene. You can get rid of this stuff. Okay, now we got to the new scene. So now we have a way to transition from scene one to scene two with communicating the information, at least as far as we know, from globals. But selection scene is now done, and then start scene controller is now done as well. We don't need game objects anymore. Main scene is fine. Let's do this now. So now we have to use that information somehow. So let's go to the player game object. And since this is just a one-liner change, what you can do now is inside, when you draw your polygon component, now you can use your player archetype color instead of some constant variable. So now if we run, hopefully, if I do tank, it's now purple. If I do sniper, it's now blue. And if I do assault, it's now yellow. Oh, now that's good. And now the next thing we can do is for the health pool controller, we reference the globals.player stats, and then we reference the max health and for both their current HP and max HP. And then we can so then inside of our health pool controller, what we can do now is just decide to start. Console.log this.current HP, and we can kind of see depends when depending on which one we choose. So if we choose that, it is 40, and it is 10 for the enemies, so that's why there's the 3 10s. It is 40 for that, 40 for that, and 40 for that, which is not good. And that is because we have a copy and paste error, I think. Selection scene, player archetype 0. Yep. Copy and paste there. So now, hopefully, if we do this, it is 40. Now it's 20. and now it's 30. And we can see that if we take damage, it should take smaller percentage of damage than, for example, Sniper, who is a little bit more frailer. So now you see that it took more damage, like percentage wise. So yeah, that we generally now know that that works. Um, Now what's next? So we have the selection, we have the health bar game object entity, we have the player game object with the. So now the next thing to do is use our other variables. So like for example, in the character stats controller, we have projectile speed, ability one, basic attack stuff. So a lot of the stuff is in our player controller. So now I reference a player stats variable, which is just global stat player stats. And what I do now is I set the horizontal speed into the player stats dot horizontal speed. Same thing with instantiating the slashing attack game object. So with the slashing attack game object now, I have the direction, scale, damage, or speed, and range. And now that is as simple as referencing. So if we look at the difference between these two lines, instead of referencing static variables, I do this dot player stats dot basic attack damage, projectile speed, basic attack range, and that type of stuff. So now we can get rid of this. And now if you just want to add a variable, you can always just go to your player stats and then boom. That's a separate issue. And then we can do the same for these two as well. It's just referencing this dot player stats dot projectile speed and ability one range. Now, hopefully, if I choose a tank, now I am slower than if I choose a sniper. And let's also show the slashing attack controller just to ensure that everything's up to date. So what I have is a direction, speed, damage, and range. If I do a simple rotation based on the direction, I have a current time variable, which I always increase. I multiply my direction and speed to get velocity and times it by delta dot time. And then if the current timer is greater than my range, then I destroy it. So I destroy it based off of the timer rather than range, but it's basically the same thing. And so now if I do my tank and if I fire, I have a low range and it is destroyed after that amount of time. And then I have my ability one, where if I go jump up and slam down, that is my second ability, or my ability one, which then does the damage as well. Now the next thing that I want to do is I want, when somebody takes damage, I want a text to appear to show how much damage the player took, or the entity took. So the reason why I like kind of my health system right now is that everything is done through apply damage. So what we can do now is, rather than saying, hey, if somehow you each track if damage is taken, we have to worry about something, and we don't have to, because it is just all through apply damage. So whenever we apply damage and you're not invulnerable, we know that we have to spawn something. So let's do let damage text game object equal instantiate new. I have a damage text game object, I think, with a destroy timer. So let's do text, and then we input damage for it. So new damage text game object with whatever damage we have. And then that new vector2, this dot transform dot position dot x plus 20, this dot transform dot position dot y minus 20. So it's in like the top right corner. And one thing you could do, which I will now for reasons explained, is that you can have it as a child. And what that will do is it will stick to your player, or the thing that that has taken the damage. The reason why I am not doing that is because I want the damage to be static. I don't want it to move after the damage is taken, because if you do a second amount of damage, what can happen is that the text overlaps relatively easily, and that's just not kind of useful and can be visually cluttery. Um, Another thing to note that I implemented a destroy timer. Obviously, well, we actually see some similarities between our slashing attack controller, where we have a current time and a time when destroyed. And so in this case would be range. So what we could do is, rather than having slashing attack game object, just have a slashing attack controller. What we could do is we could always this dot add component, new destroy timer, and then inside destroy timer we have time when destroyed, which in this case would just be range. And this will allow us to do separation of concerns and reuse something that is pretty common. So now instead of here, we don't need current timer, and we don't need range. Now all we have to do is worry about updating the position. And hopefully, if we do this, we fill that again, and it works the exact same. It is now just kind of separation of concerns. But now if we go and let's see if the text actually appears now. Well, I choose the sniper to be quick. We apply it. And it now has the -5 damage. -5 damage is now destroyed. It is the -5 damage and -5 damage. And now that if we do ability 1, -61 damage. So that means our ability 1 did 61 damage. So we can try that again, and we can even now go for try and go as highest as possible. So 68 damage, that's our new highest. So yeah, that's just now something that to visually inform the player of how much damage you did. That is pretty much it for what what I wanted to do today. There will be another video coming out as well that I'll post as an announcement, where it is a kind of a better explanation of game object hierarchies and the power of them, so that it is so that you can kind of get a better feel on the how powerful they actually are.